Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line on TVP World. This is where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Today we are in Katowice on the second day of the European Economic Conference, and I'm joined by Honorata Hencel, who is the Managing Director for Boeing for both in Poland and Ukraine. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I understand that you've just come out of a very long panel where you discussed some of the key issues that are affecting Europe.
Correct. We were actually discussing the condition of the Polish industry when it comes to the defense needs and how we can collaborate better together with both the industrial partners and the government to make sure that we actually respond to the needs of the industry, both regionally here in Poland, but also overall in Europe.
And in your opinion, and perhaps some of the conclusions you could share with us of that panel, what do you think are the absolute priorities when it comes to European defense?
So obviously, we have to understand the requirements, and the security situation clearly shows that we need to be prepared to tackle certain challenges that Europe has. It's important to build European defense base in a way that we allow, different stakeholders to be part of it. So we have local companies here in Poland. We have companies that have built that industrial base strongly across Europe. But also, it is important to allow companies that come from US, like my company, the Boeing company, or from other parts of the world, to be part of that ecosystem. Because, we don't have that much time to really ramp up the industrial base just, regionally and locally. It's important that the different players continue to build up the potential and continue to deliver to the needs.
So at the moment here, especially in Poland, there's a lot of emphasis on local content, building up the economy. Your perspective perhaps is a little bit different, given that you represent Boeing. Would you say that, given what is happening on the defense landscape, that this is an opportunity for Boeing?
It is for sure, and I'm very grateful to our government that it has been really giving us very clear prioritization of these needs, which means partner with the local industry, make sure that you give back to the industry. And, we already employ Polish personnel. We have been here for the 36 years now. We have 1,200 people. And I think it's important to understand that we continue to employ the experts in the country, to invest in those experts. And we continue to partner with the companies that actually give in to the supply chain for the Boeing company. But I think the potential is there. I believe that Polish companies, also for companies like Boeing, like our company, can actually be more vocal and more present within those supply chains, so it can actually chime into the global economy of companies like ours to make sure, that they actually are competitive. And I think this is one of the biggest opportunities.
There's a certain narrative in regards to the defense sector that perhaps there isn't enough production capabilities to meet the defense needs for Europe. Would you agree with that? What are your opinions in regards to that, and perhaps what is the best way forward?
Right. Of course, I believe that really depends how you relate it to time, because I think we have a great industrial base in Europe with, again, all of the investors, not only companies that have been born and raised here in Europe, but also the companies that have invested heavily in Europe to build that industrial base. Obviously, as I said, I think we have some urgent needs. So that's why it's important that we take all of these stakeholders into the account. So stakeholders that are local, that are localized as our company, and also, the companies that can really grow to become part of the business. And I think this is the biggest challenge. How do we shift the capabilities that exist in there in the industrial base? The question about the defense industry is actually the bigger question about the economy industry as such, right? We have companies that are actually producing things for the commercial businesses and are willing to chime into the defense business. So how do we enable it? So I would say that without utilizing all of these capabilities that potentially can be shifted towards the defense purposes, it is going to be hard to address all of the needs. However, again, I believe what is important is that the companies like ours can help to bring the transfer of knowledge or transfer of technology to the table and help those companies grow to satisfy the needs that the defense industry has.
You've raised a couple of very important points here, because you say that there are urgent needs. There's the issue of time, the transfer of knowledge. These are all very relevant and very important things, assuming that they're all done in a timely way and in the right way. So I wanted to begin by asking, what do you think are the most urgent needs at the moment here as we speak?
Well, that's a very broad question, obviously, because there's a lot of elements that would have to be aligned to make sure that everything moves in the same direction. So I think one thing is obviously, as I said, the scalability of the industrial base and identifying the companies that can be part of that value chain. That's one thing. Definitely regulatory incentives and regulatory support for the companies to actually direct their actions, their activities towards, that stronger industry. And then there are people. I think, there is a lot of equipment that can be bought to satisfy the needs of the armies of Europe. But the question is, who's going to be operating on them? Who's going to be maintaining them? Who's going to be bringing the modern technologies and the elements like AI or, cybersecurity into those platforms? I think these are like the most pressing questions. And again, there has to be a full coordination between the parties in government and the industry, and then institutions that support, for example, education or reskilling to address those. So I think this is being done right now. Then the question is, of course, how can we then enable it at the European level? And again, there are some mechanisms in the European Union right now that tend to support that direction, but it's going to be happening at different levels. I think the country level will be critical here, and then the best practice taken from those countries that kind of succeed in that way should be probably implemented to a broader scale in the European Union.
Is this something that Boeing can assist in terms of implementing that best practice?
Well, definitely, and the reason why I am, gratefully invited to those panels is that we are definitely invited to those dialogues and discussions. For example, how to enable the Polish indigenous business to meet those criteria, right? I think, we face a lot of questions like, how can I become your supplier? How can I start producing things in Poland for the foreign business? Or how can I actually produce something for the platforms that would be used in Poland? Or across Europe. So these are the things that we can definitely help on. There are certain standards. Again, both aviation industry and defense industry are heavily regulated. So it's not like you have the capability and you can start just feeding that supply chain for the defense and aviation industry straight away. You have to meet certain criteria. You have to have documentation clearance, obviously, to make sure that we avoid certain threats that could be met in the process. So these are definitely, most of these questions can be answered thankfully to us, because the thing is that the government cannot actually address all of the industrial base. It has to partner with the companies that have this knowledge, have this experience, and they can bring it in based on their legacy and years of experience in other countries as well.
You are managing director for Boeing in Ukraine as well. And I wanted to ask you, what is your assessment of the situation in Ukraine, given that you are managing director there, and what is the business that you do there?
So, well, the assessment again is that the people of Ukraine are incredibly, vital and sustaining the work that they are doing. They are doing everything they can to meet the purposes of the everydays, whether it's at work or whether it's just sustaining the pride in their country. So my assessment is that obviously we'll have to wait, hopefully, for the truce or the peace agreement to be signed, so we can stop what's happening. But that's something that's clearly not in our control right now, and that's the only comment I can make, that I hope that the people of Ukraine will have that relief. As I talked to our employees, and we have 1,200 employees in Ukraine. They are very committed to delivering services to the Boeing company. They actually serve the aircrafts, the platforms, and the parts of our company that are outside of Ukraine, and they support platforms that are being used, in the US or across the world. And that's, I think, incredible. They are incredibly skilled engineers. Also, they train other engineers how to perform the work. They do customer service, so they actually work with the airlines that are using our platforms. And they never cease to be very effective in what they do ever since the war started. I mean, their dedication has been just incredible, really. So my assessment is that when there is a time when they can unlock even more of this potential, because right now they are constrained, we'll see even more amazing things coming from Ukraine.
So assuming, obviously we all hope that the war will come to an end in Ukraine, does Boeing hope to develop its business in Ukraine?
Well, I think that we have been. It's a question it's not a question whether we will. We actually have been developing our business in Ukraine since the war started. So first, we started our business in Ukraine in 2014. So if you remember, that has been also quite an challenging year for Ukraine. Those years ago. And now, 11 years later, we actually grew. We actually managed to hire around 120 people since the war started in Ukraine, and people work virtually, but we still, develop new skills. We take on new projects. So the direction is there, definitely. Of course, what we have to take into account is the safety of our people there. So if development or growth in current circumstances would mean that we would put, any of these employees at risk, my answer is no. But if we can do it in this, as I say, sustainable way, ensuring that they are not targeted or, somehow just prone to risk, then of course, we will do it.
Absolutely. Boeing's main contracts are with the Polish Army, but also with R&D. And I wanted to ask when or if or do you know when the country intends to move most of its core production to Poland? Is it in the plans? Is it realistic? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's a great question. I love the question because, one of my biggest dreams is to make sure that the Polish aviation industry grows to be one of the best in Europe, if not further, because I think we have incredible potential there. And then, of course, I want Boeing to spearhead that effort together with other partners that we have in the domain. So first of all, we always say that we already produce very incremental parts of airplanes here in Poland because we produce hardware and software, so-called avionics, in our office in Gdańsk, which actually makes sure that the plane can leave the factory. It's certified. These are certified elements of an aircraft that if they are not mounted in the aircraft is not viable for flights and does not get certified. So that's one of the things, and some of the really critical systems that have been mandated by our regulatory bodies like FAA and EASA are being actually designed and produced out of Gdańsk. So that's important. But I know everybody wants to see the big fuselages or wings, other big elements that are being produced. So currently, we are taking, let's say, taking it in a gradual manner. We are definitely looking into Polish capability to provide more suppliers for Boeing aircraft. We already have 10 top tier 1 companies here in Poland that produce parts of the Boeing aircraft. We have, overall 30 that produce some, smaller things, and that's already incredible. We are here in the country. We are the sole actually provider of the APU unit for 787 airplanes. So those who are aviation geeks probably would know better about that part. But basically, some of the parts that really enable the Boeing aircraft to fly are being produced here in Poland. So looking, at new things that could be produced here, but looking also at scaling what we have in here, that's definitely the main step to seek something of a bigger production in Poland. And then, of course, just gaining that capability that will enable us to service and then hopefully to help build or design parts of the new airplane for the Boeing company is the key. You have to have the capability, you have to have the talent that understands to do it, and of course then, as I said, you have to have the supply chain that enables you to do things in place.
So if I understand you correctly, there are some key steps that are already happening on the production line in Poland. Maybe not as large as they would like them to be, not as many of them, but some of them are already happening in Poland.
That is correct.
Which is great news.
That is correct, and we absolutely love it. Some of them really relate, as I say, to new developments, new systems that are required by the regulators to be on the Boeing aircraft from the recent years. And the talent of Polish engineers has been appreciated, and that's why a big chunk of that work has been placed here in Poland. For those units that I mentioned, like APUs, they are obviously delivered by our suppliers. So again, this is not done by the Boeing company, but by other talents, by other companies that are present here in the Aviation Valley and beyond that.
But does this mean that if the demand from the defense sector increases, the demand from Boeing will also increase as well?
Absolutely. You know, one of the key strategic objectives for us is to make sure that we can develop those industrial partnerships in country. And again, I believe it's absolutely essential, and we really got it reiterated from the government quite clearly as the industry, that whatever, you know, would be utilized in the region, utilized in the Polish industry, should have elements or, you know, services attached to it that are being located in Poland. So definitely that's a great potential for the Boeing company.
And just as we wrap up, I wanted to ask, you know, a company like Boeing that has a legacy, has a very strong reputation, how do you deal with competition coming from new entrants, especially now that there is so much high tech that is also part of, you know, the defense sector?
Right. No, that's, I think, you know, very rapidly changing landscape, and there is a couple of considerations that we do there. First of all, if these are technologies that potentially can be used on our platforms or, you know, within our value chains, then we are looking to partner with those companies. And we have really enormous number of such partnerships in different domains, because as you mentioned, we operate in a very important domain of defense, but we also have space within the same sort of business unit, as well as we have those commercial advancements that continue to chime in. I can also tell you that we are looking into, through our daughter companies, we are looking into newest technologies, not only to satisfy the product that is being produced by our subsidiaries, our companies, but we are also looking to develop new capabilities through those. And maybe just to make it clearer, just to give you an example. So the Boeing company has a subsidiary called Whisk, which is a company that designs and produces electric unmanned taxis, beautiful yellow birds, able to contain 6 people and operate on distances more or less up to 150 kilometers. And actually last year, Whisk, part of the Boeing company, has acquired a company here in Poland, in Poznań. The company is called Veracel, and the company produces certified software. And they were looking all around the world to find the company that could meet the criteria to produce such complex software that then undergoes really, you know, big scrutiny of quality checks and that certification. And they found it in Poland. So again, partnering with such companies, finding such partners here in the region, especially in Poland, is one way of tackling it. On the other hand, you know, again, I believe that those startups, those new companies that bring emerging technologies to the table, that they also stimulate us and motivate us. Absolutely. As big companies, where such innovative processes take a little bit longer to really look into those emerging technologies. And that's the beauty of the competitive market.
Wonderful. Honorata Hencel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this brings us to the end of the bottom line here from Katowice on the second day of the European Economic Conference. Make sure you tune in to the bottom line every weekday at 5:10 on TVP World. And in the meantime, make sure that you follow us for all the business news from the region on our social media platform and on tvpworld.com. Goodbye.